Ruins of Helios Drift. Kael Varek's boots crunched over shattered alloy as he picked through the wreckage of a dead world. The Helios Drift was a graveyard of war machines, twisted husks of mechs that had slaughtered each other centuries ago. For the galaxy's empires, it was a monument to their ancestors' glory. For Kael, it was just another day's work. Asterisk, one more power core. Just one. Asterisk, his fingers tightened around the rusted hilt of his plasma cutter. The Zorathi Dominion didn't care if humans starved, but they'd pay good credits for salvage tech. A gust of wind howled through the canyon of wreckage, kicking up dust that stung his eyes. He wiped his face, then froze. Something glinted in the shadows. The find. Kael crouched, brushing grit off a half-buried metal surface. Not another scrap pile. This was intact. He dug faster, his breath quickening. A helmet. No, not just a helmet. Asterisk, a full-suit star. His pulse hammered. The angular design matched the legends. Aegis Armor, the war machines that had decided the fate of star systems. Only the strongest warriors could wake them. And yet, Kael reached out. The moment his fingers touched the cold metal, a shock jolted up his arm. The armor's visor blazed to life, casting his face in blue light. User identified. Human. Authorization granted. Kael recoiled. That's impossible. The hunt begins. The armor hissed as its seals cracked open, inviting him in. Kael hesitated. Then a roar of engines split the sky. Zorathi patrol. He didn't think. He moved. The armor closed around him like a second skin, systems whirring to life. A heads-up display flickered across his vision. Systems online. Welcome, pilot. Asterisk, asterisk. Shut up and run, Kael muttered. Too late. A shadow loomed overhead. A Dominion dropship, its cannons already charging. Escape. Kael leaped. The armor answered, rockets flaring as he vaulted over a crumbling wall. Plasma fire seared the ground behind him. His stomach lurched. This wasn't running, this was flying. Combat protocol engaged. Not helping. A mech dropped in front of him, its Zorathi pilot snarling through the cockpit. Die, mongrel. Kael's armor moved before he did. His fist slammed into the enemy mech's chest, crumpling plating like foil. The Zorathi's eyes widened. Then his machine exploded. Kael stared at his own armored hand. What the hell am I wearing? The dropship's spotlight found him again. Time to go. As he rocketed into the storm-racked sky, one truth burned brighter than the armor's core. The Dominion would never stop hunting him now. The ghost run. Kael's lungs burned as the Aegis armor carried him through the radioactive storms of Helios Drift. Behind him, the crimson searchlights of Zorathi hunter ships cut through the ash like bloody knives. Power reserves at 34%. Not now, Kael growled, banking hard as a plasma missile detonated where his head had been. The shockwave rattled his teeth. The armor's AI, Vigil, spoke calmly in his skull. You lack synchronization. Current pilot efficiency, 42%. Yeah? Tell that to the guy whose mech I punched through. A lucky strike. You will not survive another engagement at this level. Kael gritted his teeth. The damn machine wasn't wrong. Sanctuary in the scars. He crashed through the roof of an ancient foundry, the armor's dampeners barely softening the landing. Dust plumed as he rolled behind a shattered furnace. Silence. For now. Kael peeled himself out of the armor's chest cavity, his body slick with sweat. The Aegis stood sentinel, its armored plates still humming with residual energy. All right, Vigil. Talk. Why'd you wake up for me? The armor's visor pulsed. All previous pilots were warriors. You are something else. Wow. Flattering. Observation. Warriors follow patterns. You improvise. A hologram flickered to life. Footage of Kael's desperate escape, his chaotic movements. This unpredictability may be your advantage. Kael snorted. Great. So I'm too stupid to fight properly. Correct. He was about to retort when the foundry's wall shuddered. First blood. The eastern wall exploded inward. Kael barely had time to dive back into the armor before a four-armed Zorathi battle mech stormed through the smoke. Its pilot's voice boomed from external speakers. "Surrender the Aegis, human, and I'll make your death quick." Kael's fingers found the control grips. "How about I break your mech instead?" The Zorathi laughed, right before Kael charged. Dance of the untrained. It was ugly. Kael swung wildly, the armor's fists missing more than they hit. The battle mecha's retaliatory kick sent him crashing through support pillars. Left stabilizer damaged. "Shut up and help me." Suggestion: stop fighting the armor. Let it move with you. Kael rolled as a plasma axe cleaved where his head had been. The Zorathi was toying with him. Fine. New plan. He let his body go slack and pushed with his mind instead of his muscles. The armor responded. Suddenly, he was flowing, ducking under strikes with eerie precision. When the battle mech overextended, Kael's armored fist slammed into its cockpit with a crunch of breaking glass. The Zorathi staggered back, alarms wailing. Kael didn't let up. He leaped, driving his knee into the mech's chest. The truth awakens, and the Zorathi mech exploded in a fireball that sent Kael skidding backward. Panting, he stared at his smoldering fists. Vigil's voice was almost satisfied. Synchronization now at 79%. Acceptable. Kael wiped grease from his face. That was acceptable. For a first battle, the armor's systems hummed louder. But the Dominion will send more. Better pilots. A new alert flashed. Incoming transmission. Priority override. Kael frowned. We getting a call? The hologram that materialized wasn't Zorathi. It was human, a grizzled woman in a resistance fighter's jacket. Kael Varek, if you can hear this, head to these coordinates. We've been waiting for someone like you. A star chart burned into his retinas. Vigil's whisper was the last thing he heard before the transmission died. It seems you are not the only human the Aegis has chosen. The safe house betrayal. The coordinates led Kael to a derelict orbital station, its hull pockmarked by centuries of micrometeorite impacts. As his Aegis armor docked in the ruined hangar, human silhouettes emerged from the shadows, hard-eyed men and women clutching scavenged weapons. The grizzled woman from the transmission stepped forward, her mechanical left eye whirring as it focused. Kael Varek, I'm Captain Wren of the Iron Bastards. You've got the Dominion's entire 7th Fleet chasing her ass. Kael disengaged from the armor, his muscles screaming from the fight. So I've noticed. Wren grinned. Good. Means you're doing something right. A young tech with burn scars, Jax, rushed to inspect the Aegis. Holy hell, it's real. And it listens to you. Vigil's voice echoed in Kael's skull. Correction, it tolerates him. Before Kael could retort, alarms blared. The trap springs. Jax's hands flew over a cracked console. Proximity alert. 3 Zorathi hunter-killers just dropped out of warp. Wren swore. That's impossible. We're shielded. Kael's stomach turned to ice. Unless someone led them here. His eyes locked on a wiry man edging toward the door. Hask, Wren's comms officer. The man's fingers twitched toward his hip. Kael moved. He tackled Hask as the traitor drew a pulse pistol. They crashed to the floor, the gun skidding away. Bastard, Wren roared, drawing her own weapon. Hask sneered up at Kael. You think one functional Aegis changes anything? The Dominion owns this galaxy. Outside, metal screamed as the first hunter-killer tore through the station's hull. Draxus arrives. Kael barely had time to re-enter the armor before the hangar doors exploded inward. Through the smoke marched a nightmare. A midnight black Aegis armor, its edges bleeding crimson energy. The pilot's voice boomed through external speakers. Human, I am Draxus, first blade of the Dominion. You defile sacred relics. Kael's targeting system flared to life, highlighting the enemy armor's pulsing core. Threat level, maximum. Vigil's tone sharpened. This pilot has 12 confirmed Aegis kills. Do not engage conventionally. Kael swallowed. Got any unconventional suggestions? Run. Too late. Draxus lunged. Clash of Titans. The black armor moved like liquid death, its plasma whip carving molten scars across the hangar floor. Kael barely dodged, feeling the heat sear his cockpit's exterior. Wren's crew opened fire, useless against Aegis plating, but it bought Kael half a second. He used it. Kael feinted left, then rammed Draxus with his shoulder, sending them both crashing through a support column. The station groaned in protest. Structural integrity compromised. Draxus recovered first, his whip wrapping around Kael's forearm. Searing pain flashed through the neural link as metal melted. Warning, left arm systems failing. Kael roared, yanking Draxus off balance and head-butting his visor. The black armor staggered, just as Jax's voice crackled over comms. Kael, the station's core is going critical. The sacrifice play. Rin appeared in the doorway, her mechanical eye flashing red. We've got maybe 90 seconds before this whole place goes supernova. Move. Kael disengaged, sprinting toward the hangar's emergency pods. Draxus recovered faster, his whip lashing out, only to be intercepted by Captain Rin's ship, the Iron Will, slamming into him at full thrust. The collision sent Draxus spinning into the collapsing superstructure. Rin, Kael shouted. Her face flashed on his comm, grinning through the smoke. Go, kid. We'll hold the line. The last thing Kael saw before his escape pod launched was Draxus's armor tearing free from the wreckage, Rin's ship burning between them. The survivor. Alone in the pod's darkness, Kael's hands shook. Vigil's voice was uncharacteristically quiet. They bought you time. But Draxus survives. Kael stared at his reflection in the cracked visor. He'll come for me. Yes. And next time, you must be ready. The armor systems suddenly flared gold. Full synchronization achieved. Kael felt it. The Aegis wasn't just responding anymore. It was part of him. Somewhere in the void, Draxus would be hunting. Kael bared his teeth. Let him come. The calm before storm. Kael's escape pod drifted in the debris field of the ruined station, its emergency beacon deliberately disabled. Inside the cramped cockpit, the Aegis armor stood motionless, its golden synchronization pulse throbbing like a heartbeat. Draxus will trace the energy signature, Vigil warned. We have 23 minutes until combat recommences. Kael wiped sweat from his brow, replaying Rin's last moments in his mind. His fingers dug into the control grips. Then let's not keep him waiting. With a thought, the armor's thrusters flared to life, carrying him toward the nearby moon's surface, a barren wasteland of jagged obsidian spires. The perfect battlefield. Feel the blades. Draxus found him exactly where he'd intended. The black Aegis descended like a vengeful god, landing 50 meters away in a crater of its own making. Up close, Kael could see the damage from Rin's suicide charge, cracks spiderwebbing across Draxus's chest plating. You waste my time, human. The Zorothi's voice boomed across the desolate plain. Your carcass belongs in a museum, not a war machine. Kael's armor shifted into combat stance, the neural link singing with perfect synchronization. Funny, I was thinking the same about you. They moved simultaneously. Dance of destruction. Plasma met plasma as their arm-mounted blades clashed, sending shockwaves through the moon's thin atmosphere. Kael fought differently now, not just with the armor, but through it. When Draxus swung high, Kael was already ducking low, his return strike scoring deep across the black armor's thigh. His reaction time is slowing, Vigil noted. The damage is cumulative. Draxus responded with a vicious backhand that sent Kael skidding across the obsidian plain. Before he could recover, the Zorothi's shoulder cannons unfolded, unleashing a barrage of micromissiles. Kael twisted, the armor moving with instinctive grace as he weaved between explosions. One missile grazed his shoulder, another shattered a spire behind him, which gave him an idea. Human ingenuity. Kael feigned a limp, baiting Draxus into charging. At the last second, he activated his thrusters at full burn, rocketing upward as the Zorathi plowed through the unstable crystal formations. The entire obsidian field began collapsing. Draxus roared as 100-ton shards rained down, pinning his armor momentarily. Kael didn't hesitate. He dove like a meteor, both armored fists aimed at Draxus's cracked chest plate. The impact sent seismic tremors through the moon. Mercy is strength. Smoke poured from both armors as they lay in the wreckage. Kael was first to rise, his systems flickering but functional. Draxus's black Aegis was another story. The cockpit hatch hung open, revealing the battered Zorathi within. Kael raised his plasma blade and stopped. Draxus glared up at him, all four arms broken, his pride more wounded than his body. "Finish it, human." The blade retracted. "No." For the first time, the Zorathi looked genuinely confused. "You want to prove humans are weak?" Kael gestured to the battlefield. "Look around. I beat you with one Aegis. Imagine what happens when more wake up." Awakening, as if summoned by his words, Vigil suddenly pulsed with urgent energy. Alert! Multiple Aegis signatures detected galaxy-wide. All human-piloted. A holographic star map exploded to life, showing hundreds of golden markers flaring to life across civilized space. Draxus's face went slack with realization. "What have you done?" Kael turned toward the stars, where new lights were kindling in the dark. "Changed the game." Epilogue: A New Dawn. 3 standard days later, the first human Aegis fleet assembled near Helios Drift. Kael stood at the viewport of a stolen Dominion carrier, watching hundreds of golden-armored figures float in formation. Jax, now sporting a fresh scar across his cheek, joined him. "Think they're ready?" the tech asked. Vigil answered for him, "Irrelevant. The Dominion certainly isn't." Kael smiled. Somewhere out there, Draxus was watching. "Let him."